Bible when Christ walked the earth, right? So I want you to be, did anybody in the scriptures, all the saved, all the disciples of Christ, did they get saved by the New Testament? Basically, the New Testament scriptures like we have now. Did they need that to get saved?
No, New Testament didn't exist.
So how did they get saved then?
By the scriptures, the Torah, and Christ.
Okay. So you're saying that they didn't have the New Testament to get salvation?
No, they didn't. It was the gospel of Christ and the Torah.
What's the gospel of Christ?
Death, burial, and resurrection. They told people, look, he died. He's a Messiah from the Torah. They used the Torah to prove who Christ was. In the Torah, we know that the Old Testament, they teach about the Messiah coming and how the Messiah is going to come to save Israel. And they use that to show that Christ is that Messiah. Christ himself even said, all must be fulfilled. What needs to be fulfilled? Things that were spoke about him in the Old Testament. So they use that in Christ's life as a way to say, hey, look, he's that person that the Bible talked about. So if you believe in him and you're baptized and you continue to follow in his ways, which is Torah, Old Testament, you will get the kingdom. You inherit the kingdom. So that's what they use.
Okay. So you're saying that Peter, Paul, let me see, Matthew, all of the apostles, and even some of the people in the book of Acts, you're saying all of them didn't have the New Testament to know who Christ is.
No. Well, the New Testament is just speaking of Christ. So they had it in the sense of what they witnessed and what they experienced. But what we read today, no, they didn't have that at that time. Even when you think about the Ethiopian eunuch, the Bible talks about what he had. That was Old Testament. So
I agree. Okay.
It wasn't New Testament. Not to say that the New Testament is not important, because it is important.
Nah, before you go on, hold on. Before you go on, because I was about to ask that question. So, since you said that, so basically, would you 100% agree that everybody that got salvation, saved, disciples who were saints, whatever name we want to put on it, whether they're saints, disciples, everybody who got salvation through Christ didn't get it in the Bible. People that's in the Bible, we're not talking about people that live today. We're talking about people that's mentioned in the Bible. Everyone who received salvation from Christ, you're saying that they didn't get it by reading the New Testament.
No, they didn't. That would make sense.
Okay, I agree, because it wasn't written at that time. Yeah. So that's going to lead up to my next question. So my next question is, how about if somebody says, okay, they didn't get salvation from the New Testament because it didn't exist at that time. So can you get salvation with excluding the New Testament?
No, you can't.
But they got it though.
Because at that time they had the witnesses, they had these people that were still around, that still existed, that was able to share the story. Like you had Paul writing letters to these people saying, hey, when I was here, when I was there, or look, I wasn't deserving of these things. I didn't deserve to even be considered an apostle. I'm of the least. You had these people who experienced, who remembered. They were basically that the New Testament. We don't have that. We don't have apostles. We don't have.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
What I'm saying is they were the living New Testament.
Yeah, but I'm saying, okay, you just admitted.
We don't have that though.
I get what you're saying.
So we need the New Testament.
No, I agree we need the New Testament. But you know how some people, okay, you just admitted that and said that, and which a lot of people have to admit, when Christ walked the earth, the New Testament wasn't written.
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't, right? Mm-hmm. And so everybody in the Bible who knew Christ, Paul, Peter, everybody, they got saved without the New Testament even being written.
Correct.
and the only reason I'm bringing up this argument is because some people say that, well, we don't need the Old Testament. There's even some Bibles out there. You can look it up. You can Google
You don't
it.
need the Old Testament?
Hold on. There's some Bibles that only have the New Testament portion. Do you know that, right?
Yeah, I know that.
So that means that person was like, we don't need the Old Testament. We got a New Testament. They have that. That's actually made. You could go to Amazon and buy one. So since they have those New Testament only scriptures, right? And they said, well, you can get saved just using that. I agree. You can get saved reading the New Testament Bible. I agree. But saying that, can you get saved with only using the Old Testament, since everybody in the Bible saved by only the Old Testament? That's what I'm saying.
Okay, so it's a deep question, because when you're just talking about salvation, just obtaining salvation, right? We can look at a thief on the cross. He obtained salvation, and then he died. So if we're just talking about salvation, obtaining it in that initial stage, right? Then yeah, you technically don't need the Old Testament to obtain salvation.
Hold on,
but
before you go on,
you do need the Old Testament, because you're not going to understand the New Testament. Without the Old Testament, you won't understand the New Testament. And that was kind of the struggle that some people had, that new Torah. They were like, wait a minute, who is this Christ you're talking about? This blasphemy. What are you talking about? Because they were looking at some stuff in Torah and saying, wait a minute, is this not like a contradiction? And people had to say, no, this is exactly what Torah was talking about. This is what the Old Testament was talking about. He is that person. So what I'm saying is, to initially obtain salvation, which is what? The promise for eternity, to live in eternity, right?
Mm-hmm.
To be saved. You have to believe in the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, and you have to walk in his ways. The New Testament will give you that, but without the Old Testament, you will have trouble understanding the New Testament. An example I want to give is when Christ says, it was written that a man shall not commit adultery. But I say unto you, if you look with lust at your neighbor's wife, you have already committed in your heart. When you read that, it kind of sounds like Christ is separating the Old Testament from the New Testament, because when he said it has been written or you've heard, he's talking about the Old Testament. If you didn't understand the Old Testament, you would think that's what's taking place.
Okay, all right.
But that's why you need both, and you have to understand both, so that you could be able to obtain salvation and maintain salvation.
Okay, so I'm gonna tell you my stance. So I got your stance. Your stance is you need both, and I agree. I'm not trying to separate New Testament, Old Testament at all. I'm not separating, but we both agree that everybody in the scriptures, Peter, Paul, John, all of them got saved, and the New Testament wasn't even written yet. So basically, they got saved by the Old Testament only.
Yes. And
that's who they knew. They found out who the Messiah was through the Old Testament. Yeah, this is fact.
That's how we find out as well. We find out through the Old Testament as well, and the New Testament. But
so here's my thing with these people that whoever invented the New Testament only Bibles. Here's my thing. Let's say a person was born, they didn't know nothing about the Old Testament, they didn't know nothing about David, the son of David, none of that. And then you reading it, he's the son of David, he's this, he's that. How do you know that if you exclude the Old Testament? That doesn't even make sense.
You won't know, and you will be deceived. When Christ was being tested, right? One of the temptation that he faced with Satan when he was fasting was he took him. What did he say? He took him on the highest mountain, and he said that if you bow down to me, that he will give him everything that he sees. And he said what? Christ quoted the Old Testament, that you're only supposed to serve God. Then when he told him to throw himself down from the mountain and let the angels catch him, that he was quoting, Satan was quoting the Old Testament, the angel's going to catch you if you fall. Christ said you're not supposed to tempt the Lord, which is also the Old Testament. So if you try and live life without the Old Testament and only focus on the New Testament, you're going to be deceived. You're not going to be able to fight against Satan. You're not going to be able to fight against certain things. People are going to be able to deceive you, because you're not going to understand, like you said, you're not going to understand he's from the line of David. You're not going to understand that. And then someone's going to say, how is he from the line of David? if his father was not biologically Joseph and his mother,
Well,
then you
here's the
don't know the
thing.
Old Testament, you could be deceived.
Yeah, I agree.
And you won't understand.
Because you gotta go back.
That's why you need both. The Bible says that the Old Testament is for our what?
Learning.
Our learning. It's the beginning of our knowledge. We need it.
So people shouldn't be out. So that means people shouldn't be out there like saying, hey, I mean, you know, everybody entitled to their own opinion, I guess. But some people out there saying like, we don't need it. We're New Testament only Christians. But if you're New Testament only Christians and you're going to somebody that don't know the scriptures, like, how are you going to prove that this is the son of David? How are you going to prove that without the New Testament? Without the Old Testament. It makes no sense. How are you
going to prove Christ is the Messiah without the Old Testament?
Yeah.
Because the Bible talks about a Messiah coming, and it also talks about a false Messiah coming, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It talks about us being deceived, right? And how are we supposed to know the real from the fake if we don't have the knowledge of our ancestors that came before us, that were there, walked with him, which is the New Testament, and then the Old Testament, the prophets and people who came before that, who testified of his coming. If we don't have that information to line it up to see, okay, is he who he say he was? How can we even be like, yeah, he's a Messiah? If somebody came at us and started shooting us with questions, like what I said to you about his father, Joseph, being the biological dad or not. When people shoot you questions like that, you don't know the Old Testament, you're not going to know what to say, and your faith can be shaken, and you can be confused. And in a lot of cases, some people will just throw the Bible down. They'll be like, yeah, it doesn't make no sense. It's contradicting itself. Why? Because they don't want to read the old and the new. They want to take an entire book and break it into pieces, which to me is kind of dangerous.
Yeah.
Even Christ said, he said, I didn't come with my own doctrine, but with he who sent me. Who is it that sent Christ? God.
Yeah, agree.
So he came with the doctrine of God. Well, what is God's doctrine? The New Testament didn't exist yet. So how do you find what God's doctrine is? How do you find his teaching? You have to go to the Old Testament, basically.
Gotcha.